If we run once a year, if we lift weights once a year, if we play the guitar once a year, we're not going to be good at those things. We're not going to be fit in those areas. Same goes with being a leader. If you're not practicing your key business skills, you are not maximizing your leadership potential.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman. On today's episode, I speak with Mr. Rich Horwath. He's the founder and CEO of the Strategic Thinking Institute, where he serves leadership teams as a strategy workshop facilitator, executive coach, and a strategic advisor. He's a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author of seven strategic thinking books, and his work has been featured in publications including Fast Company, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Chief Executive Magazine, who called him the world's foremost expert on strategic thinking. Now, if his name sounds familiar, it should. If you've been listening for a while, he was on episode 8. Way back, baby. That would have been, August of 2017? One of our first guests, also coming back on episode 71 and apparently 207. We forgot one of those. So in speaking to Rich, we thought this was only his third time, actually the fourth time. Why? Why do I continue to have him back? He's an expert on something we cannot get enough of, which is improving our ability to think strategically. Now, I am 100% biased. I will tell you this because this man has changed my life way back, I think in spring of 2009, maybe. I took his course. He was teaching in the MBA program where I was learning. He was teaching the course on strategy, and it was there that I had a very simple conversation with him. He had just put out his book called Deep Dive, and I expressed my interest in putting out my own book at that time and starting my own company. And for reasons that still are unclear to me, he made quite a bit of time in his life for me that allowed me to think through what we were doing. And I used the next 2 years in the MBA program and him as a very valued mentor to launch our company in August of 2011. And we've stayed close ever since. And yeah, he's absolutely changed my life. Now, that is not enough. Just because you change my life doesn't mean you get to come on the pod. What does he do? You're going to hear that he makes strategy tangible and easy to understand, and I think even more important, easy to implement to become a better executive. I firmly believe that. He's got a new book coming out called Strategic, the skill to set direction, create advantage, and achieve executive excellence. He's got a whole host of tools to help you and your team do that, to be more profitable, and just really be successful with less BS. And I'm in for that. And I've got a way to go on my own, strategic ability to lead our team. And I want to get better. And that's why I'm going to invest in this book for sure. So I'm going to quit rambling. Without further ado, excited for you to listen to again, or maybe for the first time, Mr. Rich Horwath, founder of the Strategic Thinking Institute. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Rich Horwath, welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast.
Bradley, thank you so much for having me. This is my favorite conversation of the year.
Yes, it will be. You know what you get when you come back, when you're part of the Third Timers Club? You get a beige cardigan. So we'll put that in the mail. The green jacket comes with 5 appearances. So you can see the good stuff's coming in the future.
Well, that beige cardigan is going to go really well with my camel skin pants. Camel skin is very hard to get, but if you look at alpaca is much tougher to get. So I went with the camel skin, so I'm looking forward to the cardigan. That'll be a nice piece. And then I've got a peacock scarf, actually, that works pretty well in the fall with the colors, the leaves here in the Midwest.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's Rich. We will see you next time on the Construction Leadership Podcast. That's how we start out. You know what? We are going to start at the top. Can you please give us your definition of strategy, because we're going to get into some of these. I want to read personally. There's one section here I love. I think it's hilarious. As you know, a lot of people throw around the word strategic. I think in some cases, they're kind of oblivious to actually what it means. In some cases, I think they know. I just sound incrementally more intelligent if I use it more often. So what is a basic definition of strategy to get us started right here?
Yeah. So first, let's start with what strategy is not. Strategy, and think about the ABCs. So strategy is not aspiration. How many times do we see a strategy to be the premier provider of, to be number one in the market? Folks, that's not a strategy. That's an aspiration. That's what you're trying to achieve. Strategy is the how. Strategy is also not best practices. A lot of times we see competitors doing this, so we match them. Competitors doing that, we match them. What that does is create competitive convergence. Strategy is all about differentiation. So strategy is not about best practice. It's about doing things differently. And then the third C is caution. As successful as we are, what happens is we tend to get a little bit conservative. And the more success we have, the more conservative we become. So strategy really demands the ability to take calculated risks and to drive success through innovation. So back to your point, what's strategy? I define strategy as the intelligent allocation of limited resources through a unique system of activities to achieve a goal. So really simply, strategy is how you plan to achieve your goal. And we think about strategic, I think you're so right on, Bradley. We throw strategic around in front of lots of words to sound important. If you want, put an English accent on it. Strategic, that makes you sound even more intelligent if we put English on it. So that does too. But we think about strategic, what it really is, it's possessing insight that leads to advantage. So if we use that definition, what could be strategic? A person can be strategic because they possess insight. A plan can be strategic because that possesses insight. But there's lots of stuff that doesn't pass the mustard. So again, to your point, define strategy really is how we plan to achieve our goal. And strategic then is really possessing that insight that leads to advantage.
Cool. And when you talk about resources, I'm flashing back to a little place called Schaumburg, Illinois. It's like on a Wednesday evening around 9:00. You were teaching in our MBA program, talked about the intelligent allocation of limited resources. I believe those would be capital, talent, and time. Is this correct?
Absolutely. I love that memory. And by the way, Bradley was the best student we've ever had at the school, by the way.
As far as our audience knows, that is correct. So we'll transition here. I want to read this sentence you got here that I really enjoyed. And I think it's a good segue into what we're going to go over next was the essential meta skill of a leader is to navigate their business with a thorough understanding of the current situation, vision to see the future destination, and the ability to create the path to reach it. As I read that, I was also thinking, okay, what are the big banana peels there? You talked about the ABC. Are there some common mistakes you see in your work with leaders that they struggle when they're trying to develop strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing to think about when we're navigating is we've got to feel like we've got command, we've got control of what's going on. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of uncontrollables in the environment, stuff that we can't really get a handle on, but there's things that we can control. So we really want to understand, first of all, what's on our controllable list, what's on the uncontrollable list. I facilitate a lot of strategic planning sessions where people are spending a lot of time worrying about stuff that's completely out of their control. So really the first thing I think to your point is let's focus on what we can control. The second piece when it comes to what we can avoid is really the ability to try to not be better. And that's counterintuitive. It's like, well, yeah, we want to be better. We want to be the best. But better is always subjective. Better is subjective in our minds. Is blueberry pie better than banana cream? I don't know. I guess, but what we can say is blueberry pie is different. Because it has blueberries, they have antioxidants, they're good for you. Maybe they help you live longer. So one of the main things we've got to watch out for is this idea of trying to be better and faster. Yes, those things are important, but those typically are operational. Strategy is really about how are we creating a unique system or a different set of activities and configuring our resources to create and deliver value that's different than the competition can, and that really drives customer satisfaction and success in the long term. So those would be two of the main things. I think the third thing that we've really got to be wary of is overcomplicating it. Too often I look at strategic plans, it's 60, 70 slides, it's a big PowerPoint deck, and it's not answering the two fundamental questions of a plan, which are number one, what are you trying to achieve? And number two, how are you going to achieve it? For every executive out there, for every sales manager, for every independent contributor, you've got to answer those two questions in your first slide right up front. If you don't do that, you don't have command of the business. And for those of you who are not writing the plan down, you're not answering those two questions. It's all up here in my head. You are less prepared for success than a Pee-wee football coach. I know Pee-wee football coaches that spend 11, 13 hours a week game planning, putting their stuff down on paper so that those 9-year-olds can run the bubble screen to perfection on Saturday afternoon. So again, if you're one of those leaders that says, I've got it all in my head, that doesn't work. You've got to have something concise, 1 or 2 pages, answer those two questions, and that's what you're going to use to communicate through the rest of the organization.
Do you have a test or an exercise to work with broader teams? If you have a leader who says, Rich, I think we're good. I think, the goals, I'm pretty confident. And it comes to how we're going to achieve them, I think my guys will do okay. If you ask my guys, I think I'll be happy with the answers. Do you have any recommendation on how to test that? Because sometimes it stops there. And I've had leaders say, geez, Bradley, I don't know, if we're talking about sales strategy, I don't even want to know. And I'm like, let's sit on that for a minute. If you don't really want to know, do you have a test or recommendation that maybe our audience could do as kind of a gut check to see if they are doing a good enough job of communicating the strategy at this point?
That's a really great point, because typically when you're assessing that, you want to assess two things. You want to assess knowledge. Do we know our market? Do we know the customers? Do we know the competitors? And then you want to test behaviors. So those are the two separate things. So in my world, I use a strategy survey. It's real simple. Any of you can develop one. It asks things, and typically the strategy survey is 4 areas. It's market, customers, competitors, and company. So you want to ask questions like, who's your most dangerous competitor and why? What resources do they have that you don't have? When it comes to your company, what are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, our threats? What are the 1 or 2 big challenges that are going to prevent us from being successful? So again, I think first of all, you want to measure people's knowledge of the business. Secondly, you want to measure their behaviors, their habits, their mindsets. And so I have an assessment called the Strategic Quotient, or SQ. So everybody out there is familiar with the IQ, right? The EQ, which is the emotional intelligence. Now we've got the SQ, which is really measuring how well you think, plan, and act strategically. And typically we've had about 3,000 people take it so far, and the average score is around 69 out of 100. So I think in general so far, what we're seeing is people are doing a pretty good job of executing, not as good of a job at allocating, making trade-offs. And really the area where people struggle the most is ideation or innovation, coming up with new and different ways to bring value to their market. And again, it's really a matter of giving people some tools that are practical to help them do that. So those would be the 2 buckets, knowledge and skills. And I think if you measure both of those things, it gives you as a leader a good idea of where your team is.
Well, I took the SQ. I'm not sure if my name was included. I'm not sure if you reviewed it. I'm just going to say I can do better. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to leave it at that. I don't want to quantify it. I've got room to improve for our team. So you're going to give me some tools. Rich, I want to read this part of chapter 1. And you say, the following are examples of strategies pulled from real companies. So these are all quotes. Quote unquote, become more profitable. Sounds reasonable. Quote unquote, grow our audience. Quote unquote, be number 1 in the market. Execute integration and capture synergies. That's exciting. And quote unquote, we are trying to find the people who were customers and didn't come back. That's a major strategy. So these are quotes from real human, probably smart people. What's wrong with any of these statements? Because profitability and audience and market and customers and Lord knows synergies sound smart. What's wrong with those?
What we're talking about there is strategy versus achievement. Achievement is really going to be around your goals and objectives. So goals are generally what you're trying to achieve. Objectives are specific. So they're quantifiable. You put a time frame on them, grow the business 48% by Q3 2024, an objective. So the things that we just described there that you just talked through are really things that are aspirational in nature. Strategy is how are we going to get there? Think about a path. Think about a bridge. What's going to take you from point A to point B? That's what the strategy is. And the reason, to your point, Bradley, I think a lot of smart people struggle with this is because strategy is abstract. It's like leadership or love. You cannot reach out and touch it. So I think because of that, we go either to the goal or to the tactic right away. But strategy is important because if we don't have strategy in place, we don't have that general direction for our resources, then it becomes, if we're not successful, this game of tactical roulette where we're throwing stuff up against the wall and hoping something sticks. And that's not going to be good long term. So again, I think the reality is a lot of good people struggle because strategy is abstract. Even go back to Sun Tzu, the Chinese general and philosopher. Thousands of years ago, he said, all the men can see the tactics I used to conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which great victory is evolved. So we've got to get comfortable with the fact that strategy is general, it's abstract, but it's absolutely critical to give us and our team guardrails in which to work.
So we talk about with companies that might be listening, and I hear just a lot, and it's true. In our industry, we're seeing a lot of volatile commodity pricing, and we're seeing a lot of folks because of that. And I think they would also say from other reasons, despite years of really good success, and I would say this year is going well. Also, we are seeing them miss their financial goals. Rich, you wrote that 90% of firms that are missing their financial targets, it's because of internal issues. That leads me to believe probably these are things that we can control. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a really good insight, Bradley, on your part. They are things that we can control. So think in your company about a couple things that could rear their head. Things like fire drills. So fire drills are urgent but unimportant events that consume a lot of resources, people, time, meetings, attention, and they take us off course of what we should be focused on. So fire drills are a big internal challenge. Silos. Even companies that are small to mid-size struggle with silos, meaning we've got groups of people here and here and here, but we're not really aligning on what we're doing and moving our resources cohesively together. And we've got to have that alignment if we're going to be successful long term. And the third one that drives a lot of people crazy is too many priorities. If you're a leader, part of your job is to say, we're going to focus on X. And even though Y and Z are really good opportunities, we're not going to do it. We're not going to spread ourselves too thin. We're not going to tread water. We're going to focus where we can bring the most value. It's really counterintuitive for a business leader to say, hey, we're going to forego these customers or this business, but that's what the great leaders and the great businesses have always done. So I think those internal dysfunctions like fire drills, silos, too many priorities, again, we've got to have the discipline to overcome those if we're going to be successful.
Take us inside maybe a coaching scenario when someone says, Rich, I've watched the videos, I've read your books, I got the new one. I hear what you're saying. I'm just getting a lot of pushback. We are just struggling to really focus, to say no to certain customers, even though we like these customers and we think it's a good fit. I don't know. I'm struggling to get our team to say, yes, we can make these tough trade-offs. I don't know. How can you help me? Where do you take them from that? Because I think it's I struggle with it. It's a common problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So I would say the first thing we got to do as a leader is step back and think about what's our business model. And again, Bradley, you know this as well as anyone. The business model simply is three things. It's how do you create value? How do you deliver value? And how do you capture value? And within the business model, we want to think about, especially with how we create and deliver value, what's our value proposition? And we think about the value proposition. It's who are the customers we're focused on? What are the needs that they have? How do we deliver that value? And then what are the benefits to them? If we're doing those basic building block types of things, then we in our mind have said, these are the customers and these are the needs or jobs to be done where we bring the most value and customers see the difference that we can bring. If we've done that work, then we all of a sudden lift ourselves out of that commodity status. And it gives us a way to then do what you just described. It's to say, look, as a team, we've decided that this is our business model. These types of customers probably don't fit our business model. So if we're going to continue to serve them, it's going to need to be reciprocal from a relationship standpoint, meaning, yes, we could keep some of them, but they're going to have to either pay more, be less customized, or do things that are going to fit where we bring value. Again, trying to be, Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, when she came in, she's done a great job. They were coming out of bankruptcy. She came in, she looked at the business. She said, look, I'm here to win. We are not going to win by serving all people all the time. That is not the right strategy. So I think she hit it right on the head. While it's nice and altruistic to think we can be all things to all people, it's simply not going to work in the long run. So again, tell your team, let's think about our business model. Who are the customers that benefit? Where's the greatest value? And then what are those trade-offs looking like? And again, we're going to have to leave some of the customers as more of a deprioritization.
Yeah, well, I like that comment. I think our audience needs to hear this, that all your customers are not equal. And yes, you can charge more for the exact same service to this type of customer because of the value. You can't do it for everyone, and allow them to either deselect or make a higher margin for whatever reason that they're not the ideal fit. I know our audience often kind of struggles with that approach.
Yeah, just to build on what you said, one of the ways we can tackle this, because it's not easy and oftentimes it's not valuable to say no to a customer. So if you're in an interaction, it's easy for me, on the screen to say, just tell them no and cut them off. That's easy to say as somebody externally. So what I would say, though, a technique I've used with a lot of leaders that I've worked with is, let's use the yes and philosophy. And you know this from your background. When we think about improv comedy, that's a technique, yes and. So how do we use it in business? If a customer comes to you and says, hey, Bradley, I need you to facilitate this workshop in 2 weeks, and I want you to customize it, and I want you to do all this stuff, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, 2 weeks, that's not enough lead time. I don't really have the people to do it. Instead of saying, look, no, I can't do that, or saying, yes, I'll do it exactly like you said, then what we could do is say, the third option is yes, and. So in this case, it might be Bradley saying, yes, and what we'll need to do is we'll need to charge an extra 60% because we're in a 2-week window instead of a 6-week window. And it's going to ask us, we're going to have to bring on 3 more people in the short run. So that's going to raise our costs a little bit on this end. And instead of customizing exactly, we're going to have some of these elements be off the shelf in order to meet your timeline. Does that work for you? So now I've told them yes, and I've told them what the criteria are. They may not love all the criteria, but in the same token, I didn't throw my team under the bus and say, look, guys, got to turn it around in 2 weeks, even though it's impossible.
I've been guilty of that. Yeah. And I think it's just a way of saying, you are saying no, more than likely, but what you're doing is you're putting it back. You're giving them that control to make that decision, but at least more on your terms. And then if they say, all right, that works, well, new information has now come to light about the willingness to pay and what do we go from there. So that's really helpful. I like that. Let's talk about innovation a little bit. Not all, we got some of our commercial construction folks are listening. I think in general, as that segment of the industry, they're doing a good job of thinking about innovation and the tools and the approaches in some different ways. Other side here are lumber and building material folks, innovation rich. It is not a value. There are no innovation awards. It's not a core value. We give awards for people being in business a long time, which, hey, I get it. It's not easy. Hats off to you if you can do it for a century. However, this idea about innovation, especially when we have a ton of consolidation going on, Rich, talk to us a little bit about the book, how you approach innovation, and for folks that are thinking about that, how maybe can your ideas and frameworks help them accelerate their trip down that path?
Yeah, great points there. And the first thing I'd say is there's a big difference between experience and expertise. So it's fine to say, hey, we've got 100 years of experience, but are you the best at what you're doing? Too many people rest on their laurels. They rest on the legacy. And look, the U.S. Post Office has been delivering things for 234 years. Amazon's been around for about 29, 30 years. Who would you rather deliver something important? Do you want to order something this morning and get it this afternoon? Well, you're not going to call the post office. So experience alone doesn't mean much in my book. So back to your point, innovation then is really using your expertise, okay, whatever that is, in order to create new value for customers. Too many people look at innovation as a product or technology. That's one type of innovation. There's 14 types of innovation, and innovation can be really small, incremental things. You know, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, was quoted as saying, I bet 70% of the innovation we do focuses on slightly improving a process. He said that incremental invention is a huge part of what makes Amazon tick. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, he was quoted as saying, everybody in our company is responsible to be innovative, whether they're doing operational work, product work, customer service work, whatever. He said, we don't have an innovation department. That's everybody's job. So the first thing I want people to think about is innovation is creating new value for your customer. Your customer might be internal if you're supporting your sales team or marketing team, or it might be external. So if you use the lens of creating new value, every interaction, every service, every education, every product, every offering has the seeds for innovation. The key is, what are the challenges, issues, or problems that my customer has that haven't been adequately solved for? Those oftentimes are going to be that seed of innovation. So we've got to really get our arms around innovation isn't this giant thing. It's looking at the challenges our customers have and saying, how can we bring them new value?
Yeah, I love that. So my mind is racing. The 14 types, I can think of like 2. So I'm excited to kind of read that here. As we wrap this up, Rich, obviously, I want you to make it super clear where people can go and invest in basically buying a couple cases of your book. It's called Strategic, the skill to set direction, create advantage, and achieve executive excellence. Where can they find this? And also, I think it was really powerful for me. It did not take a long time, but it covered a lot of territory. That your strategic quotient assessment, it was, as I've mentioned before, kind of a punch to the gut, but it also, again, I've read your stuff. I've followed you. I'm trying to do this, but it's a different way to quantify it. And then it's saying, okay, I have an expert saying I'm good here. I need to focus on here, or I need to share this with my team and have them help us move over here. So it created a pathway. So make it super clear where people can buy the book, buy cases of the book, buy the SQ, or how they can engage with Strategic Quotient, anything to help them move forward to improve their overall strategy IQ.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. So the main takeaway from the book, the Cliff's Notes version, is we need to build our strategic fitness. And in the book, I talk about 4 areas: strategy, leadership, communication, organization. So there's hundreds of tools, checklists, things that you can do to build your strategic fitness. If we run once a year, if we lift weights once a year, if we play the guitar once a year, we're not going to be good at those things. We're not going to be fit in those areas. Same goes with being a leader. If you're not practicing your key business skills, you are not maximizing your leadership potential. So I developed this book and then the Strategic Fitness System, which is an online platform which works with it, and the Strategic Quotient to give everybody out there, as you said, a way to baseline, where am I starting from objectively? And then what are the tools and the workouts I can use to build my strategic fitness so I can max out that leadership? So the book is coming out November 7th. Before that happens, though, there's a lot of great bonus materials. If you buy the book in quantities of 10 or more for your team, you can get 3 months of free Strategy Espresso, which is a micro learning, comes to your inbox every day for 3 months. You can get access to the Strategy Vault, which is an online resource center with 100 different strategy resources. You can get a discussion guide. So lots of great things. If you go to strategic-book.com, so strategic-book.com, you can learn more about the book and learn more about ways to take advantage of some of those offers. And then for the Strategic Quotient and a lot of other free materials and videos, you can visit strategyskills.com. So that's strategyskills.com. Lots of free resources there.
We will make sure we put all of those in the show notes. So you can just one click will take you right there. Rich, I am supremely biased. However, I think this is This is awesome stuff. I appreciate you coming on. Every time we talk, every time I read more of your stuff, I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer. But as you were just talking about practicing this, I'm like, yeah, I'm guilty of that. I'm getting caught up in the whirlwind and how stuff like this. And that's where just how can you have a book? How can you have tools? And also how can you share them with your team that says, hey, how do we pull ourselves out of that and take a step back and say, what are we doing? Right? How are we trying to get there to be more intelligent? And I think this book makes it really easy on how to do that as a team to be better. And I think for executives, this is the job, right? If you're not setting strategy and it's not clear to your team, you're not doing your job. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. The number one role of a leader, according to lots of research, is the ability to set strategic direction. But Gallup did research over the last 30 years and found only 22% of employees think that their leadership sets good strategic direction. So like you said, there's a whole world of opportunity for people to get better, to practice that. And the one plug I'd make for you, Bradley, is, and I know your listeners know this already, but you've built this podcast over the years into really probably what's one of the most dynamic podcasts out there in any of the disciplines. And what I would suggest is your ability to continue to grow and ask great questions and stimulate people's thinking. That is practice because of your work with executive teams and building the different businesses that you've built. So I think, you've done a really good job. I think you're a role model for myself and a lot of people in this area of what's possible if we do dedicate ourselves to doing something consistently. And I think your practice with the podcast and building that into the empire it's become is really a good shining indication of what is possible for the rest of us.
Well, thank you. I ideally close every podcast with a giant compliment to the host. This is how I like to end them. But Rich, thank you again. The book is Strategic, The Skill to Set Direction, Create Advantage, and Achieve Executive Excellence by Mr. Rich Horwath. Rich, thank you.
Bradley, thank you.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Rich Horwath. Here is what I'm going to promise you. There will be no time in the future, none, it's impossible, that you will ever look back and say, you remember that time we spent like $1,000 to get more tools available to us, to be smarter when it comes to strategy about how we pursue our goals? I wish we didn't spend that money. I wish we would have reallocated that money. That is not going to happen. We don't have enough tools. We don't have enough books. We don't have enough online resources. Rich has these. It's a small investment that can change the trajectory of your business. I firmly believe it because it's changed my business for sure. So check it out. Again, it's called Strategic, The Skill to Set Direction, Create Advantage, and Achieve Executive Excellence. If you got value from this episode, in addition to investing in Rich's stuff, at least check it out. Use the free tools he's made available. Please leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. That means more to us than you know as we strive to grow our audience, help more people, and bring our construction community closer together. If you are only listening to this as audio, you are missing out. We are continually investing more to create video content and put it on YouTube. Why? To make it easier for you to share with your team and review in a different medium. So having this video of seeing Rich talk, I think is going to add a lot of value. Every single week, we're putting out more video content there. It's 100% free. The whole idea is to make this easier for you to grow and improve with your team. So if you're not checking that out already, go to YouTube. It's Bradley Hartman and Co. You'll find us there. We got a bunch of content there, and subscribe. It's free. Our sincere hope is that we're putting out the best stuff possible that can help you run a better business, be more profitable, and achieve your goals. All right, I'm going to quit rambling. I'm out. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, you're owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.